to every single person in his White House and on the Capitol Hill. He wants his bill passed.
Mm.
And it's very clear that Democrats are going to use their new power to say we can get things done. And this legislation is going to be really,
All right, Marian, I'm gonna turn it on over to you.
All righty,
Let me
awesome.
make you the let me make you host really quickly.
Okay. 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 All right, just give it just another second or two, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for attending. This is the workshop for the top 10 ways to self-publish your book, your first book, the right way. So we still have just a couple more people coming in. So we're going to get started in just another second. I think I have everyone. There we go. Okay, I wish there was a way for me to just say admit all to it so we can go ahead and get started because I don't want anyone to be waiting while so hold on. Think okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started and hopefully um, we can get going here. Tamika, there's no way to, I guess there's no way to have someone else do that. Okay, so I can go ahead and get going. Okay, so I apologize if there is someone else in the chat room. Um,
If
so
you have a co-host, your co-host can admit for you.
yeah, I don't. I didn't realize that that was going to be the situation. Yeah, I know. I know that could be the case. But we didn't get it set up that way. But it's okay. We'll go ahead and get going. And hopefully, I apologize in advance, guys, if I have to stop for a second and let someone else into the room. So just kind of bear with me for a second. But all right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. So this is the workshop for the top 10 ways to self-publish your first book the right way. And for some reason now okay. So to get started, just to tell you a little bit about me, I've penned 6 women's fiction novels. I've had quite a few in-studio features on television stations such as Fox, NBC, CBS, and features in print and online magazines such as USA Today, Black Enterprise, the AJC for those that are here in Atlanta, and the Wednesday Journal for any of you guys that might be from Chicago. Some of my book awards include the USA Best Book Award, the African American Fiction, Sankofa Literary Society Award, the AAMBC Bestseller Award. I've also been ranked in the top 100 literary fiction Kindle authors. And in November, I signed a traditional publishing contract for my book that's coming out this year called So Me. So I'm super excited about that. So so let's get started. So, I know you guys can really kind of talk at this time because we're muted, but who here has ever purchased a pair of jeans? I'm pretty sure all of us in our lifetime have purchased a pair of jeans. And why is that so important? Because the top things that you look for when you're looking to purchase a pair of jeans is you look for the look, the fit, and the price. Well, self-publishing a book is no different. When it comes to self-publishing your book, you're looking at the look. And when we're talking about the look, we're talking about the book cover and how it must be appealing. We're also talking about the fit. So you're referring to the exterior and the interior and how they must match the genre that you're targeting. And then also we're talking about price. You don't want to price yourself out of the game. And we're going to kind of break some of this down. So for those that are taking notes, don't worry, we're going to dive into each one of these sections. So how do you self-publish your book so that it's like a perfect pair of jeans? For one thing, you follow the rules. And the way you do that is, we're going to talk about what you'll learn at the end of this workshop. So in this workshop, you're going to learn 10 top self-publishing rules that will help you publish your first book the right way. So let's look at number 1 is don't look self-published. So you want to get the staples right. And what do I mean by that? I mean that you need to invest in a book cover design artist. Now, I know that can be quite expensive when you're self-publishing your book, but trust me, I've learned the hard way. When I first started out in the book industry in 2009, I published my first book called Coloring Jasmine, and I did the book cover myself. And I thought it was like the coolest thing in the world, and it turned out the cover was actually horrible. But it sold okay, and this publishing company contacted me and said, hey, we love your story, but your cover is horrible. So they really kind of educated me on the importance and how certain design factors that need to be in a book cover. So as we all know, it's a saying that people judge books by their cover. And so without visiting one, then you have a chance that your book will fail. The average cost for a book cover design artist is between $600 to $1,000, and some can even go higher than that. And if you're publishing your book in a digital format, then of course the cost could be lower. And by digital, I mean that you're allowing your book to be published only for like Kindle or Nook or something for digital readers. But if you do publish your book in digital, paperback, or hardcover, then this would include the range of $600 to $1,000. But ensure that the designer, if you're going to use a book cover artist, make sure your designer knows how you intend to publish your book, because they'll want to make sure that when they're creating the digital version of your book, that they're also setting that book up for the print version as well. When I talk about print during this workshop, I'm referring to either your print copy, meaning your paperback, or your hardcover. So just want to make sure. So at the end of this workshop, I'm going to take questions for any of you that might have them. So let's go on to something else that's really important in this. And that is, let's talk about fonts. So when we talk about fonts, we're talking about staying away from fonts such as sans serif type fonts such as Helvetica, Arial, and you want to select fonts such as Garmin Pro, which is an excellent font for like general fiction and thrillers. Garmin Pro is also an easy to digest classic typeface. Bakersfield for anyone that's writing literary fiction. It's a very highly readable font when it's set in a small size, which makes it the perfect choice for literary fiction. Um, the next one I'm going to show you is a couple of slides that go into a quick talk about word count and what's important as far as word count. When you look at fiction books, whether you're writing nonfiction, mainstream romance, general fiction, science fiction, historical fiction, the word count of your book needs to match your genre. So, if you have a novel length book, that's typically between 50,000 and 110,000 words. And today I'm noticing that a lot of traditional publishers, especially if you're writing women's fiction, they're looking for a word count of at least 60,000. So in these next couple of slides, I'm going to give you a few seconds and you've got a pen and paper to jot down a couple of the word counts that are suggested for your particular genre that you might be writing in. So this will definitely help you to craft your book the correct way when you're looking to self-publish. So here are a couple of word counts by genre that you'll want to take notice of. I've got one here for mainstream romance, general fiction, science fiction, fantasy for anyone that's writing that, historical fiction, thrillers, horror, crime, mystery, and we're going to go into some other for like children's and everything, but I'll give you a second to jot down those word counts. Okay, so moving on to the next one, here are the word counts for young adult, picture books, early readers, chapter books, and middle grade. And then after this, for any of you that might be writing nonfiction, I'm going to show you the suggested word count for nonfiction as well. Okay, so here are your word counts by genre for nonfiction. Okay, so we've talked about rule number one, which is really making sure that you are having the right font for your genre that you're writing in, making sure your book cover is great. Now we're going to talk about, we talked about your word count. So let's move into rule number two. This is probably, these next two, rule number two and rule number three, is probably two of the biggest things you want to consider when you're self-publishing your book. And this is something that I didn't really know in the beginning when I was self-publishing my first book, but over the years, I've really learned quite a bit as far as self-publishing. But you want to know what a book wholesaler does. So key point here is that wholesalers are companies that buy books in bulk at a discount, and then they resell them to retailers. Most bookstores are mostly their bookstores. They don't do any marketing for you, and they require you usually to have at least 10 or more titles that have sold at least 50,000 copies over 2 years. If you're going directly to a wholesaler. Now, there's ways also to get with a wholesaler without that 10,000, that 50,000 copies over two years, and we'll talk about that. But a little bit more about wholesalers. Wholesalers make their money on volume. So they typically are only interested in books that will sell many copies. Wholesalers put out a catalog of available titles regularly, usually either every month or every quarter, and they send it to all the bookstores that buy from them. The bookstore purchasers go through that particular catalog and they pick out what they want to order. Then they place one big bulk order from the wholesaler that can include books from a dozen publishers or more. So wholesalers are good to have. Um, so just remember that this illustrated catalog, it's not a big, pretty illustrated catalog that's eye-catching with like covers and full descriptions. It's basically a catalog that contains the title, the author, and the ISBN. Now, that term ISBN, don't worry, we're going to actually go into that into more detail of what an ISBN is. And again, I've said wholesalers don't market your book. They usually wait until the order comes in and then they send the book out. And this allows bookstores to place the order from many publishers in one batch. Now, something else to keep in mind is that wholesalers buy books at about a 55 to 60% discount from the list price. List price is your retail price. So if your book is priced at $15 retail, then the wholesaler will pay you $6.75, and that's based off a 55% wholesale discount. And don't forget that in that, you need to subtract your print costs, like the cost to print your book. So that has to be subtracted from your $6.75, and that's usually what we call net profit. So that's just something to keep in mind. Some of the wholesalers that you would see out there in the marketplace are Ingram and Baker and Taylor. So there are ways, I said, to go directly with them. And you can do Google them and they'll show you what their requirements are. Baker and Taylor requires a marketing plan, a couple copies of your book. So they're pretty in depth with what they require in order to sign on with them for them to be able to get your book out into the marketplace. So let's move on now to rule number 3, and let's talk about book distributors. Now, here's something about book distributors is that these are mainly what authors work with. So this is probably the most important part of your self-publishing journey when getting your book out to the marketplace, is you have to know what a book distributor does. And book distributors can distribute your book to bookstores and libraries. So here are some key things that distributors do for you. They serve the author and they also work with publishers in 3 main ways. So they set up the titles with many wholesalers. Remember we talked about wholesalers like Ingram and Baker and Taylor, and I told you that there is a way to get with those wholesalers without having to go directly through them and meet their very strenuous requirements. One way to get with wholesalers is to use a distributor. Lightning Source is a distributor. Lightning Source requires at least 10 books in order to set up with them now. Most authors that are just coming into the literary world and looking to self-publish their first book usually go with a distributor called Ingram Spark. Ingram Spark is very reasonable. And so you can look them up. If you're looking to self-publish digital books, such as getting your book on Kindle and Nook and Google Books and things of that nature, then you might want to consider a digital publisher called Draft2Digital. So there's a lot of others out there, but those are just a couple. Some other things to know that some distributors have active sales force, and they actually pitch your book, and they pitch it to bookstores and try to get your books on their shelves. These distributors are very difficult to get on when you're a self-published author and you're publishing your first book, unless you can show to them through your marketing plan that you have a good amount of dedicated people that have agreed to purchase your book when it's released. Good thing for self-published authors now is that most of the distributors, Lightning Source and Ingram Spark, have a POD model. This is a print-on-demand model. And with this print-on-demand model, your book, here's a key thing that I want everybody to remember is that most bookstores require that your book be returnable in order for them to purchase your book. So Barnes and Nobles, if you're trying to get your book into their bookstores and you're using a print-on-demand model from one of the distributors, they will require that your book be returnable. So that's something to keep in mind, because if they purchase 10, 20 copies of your book per store, and out of that 10, 20 copies, only 2 of them sell, then the other 8 copies are going to be returned. The thing you have to remember is that your distributor would have paid you on those 10 copies already. So you actually could end up being in the rears with them, because now you're going to have what's called a chargeback. So just keep in mind when you're working with distributors and you're looking to get your book into bookstores, to count the cost, as they say, outweigh the, write down the pros and cons of actually working with bookstores, because you could run into the risk of chargebacks. But typically, distributors, they can provide print copies of your book. So Ingram Spark can provide print copies of your book for bookstores. They will actually, they can help get your title set up with Amazon and Barnes and Nobles and all of the major retail sites out there. They also will print copies of your book for like festivals and fairs. You can order print copies directly to them. Some of them have audiobook distribution packages as well. So if you're looking to get your book as an audiobook, they can assist with that. Typically, when you order copies of your book to sell on your own, you pay the book's print cost plus any shipping and packaging costs associated with that. Typically, a book that is around 300 pages usually ranges anywhere from $4 to $5 to print. Okay, so, and I showed you that with some of the examples of distributors out there. So take a look at Ingram Spark. Barnes and Noble Press also has a self-publishing called Nook Press. So I recommend that you use Ingram Spark for to get your book out there to retailers such as Target, Walmart, things of that nature. But to get your book on Amazon, I would suggest that you go directly through Amazon. So it cuts out the middleman, cuts out the percentage that you have to pay a little bit. And if you want to get your book on Nook, I suggest that you go through Nook Press and actually work with them directly versus having Ingram Spark or any of them actually load your book up on those sites. So just remember, go through Amazon and self-publish your book, and also go through Nook Press and self-publish your book, and use Ingram Spark for other retail sites to get your book on, because it will reduce the cost that you have to pay for that. So just a tip there. I'll give you another website that you can look into. It's called ibpa.com. Again, it's I-B as in boy, P as in Paul, A as in apple.com. And that's a good site to go to find a good list of distributors for your book. If you don't want to use ones like Lightning Source or Ingram Spark or things like that, but they have a huge distributor, a huge list of distributors that you can actually look into. Okay, so let's look at rule number 4, which is making sure you have the correct trim for your genre. And so the most common trim size for a book is a 5.5 by 8.5. That is the most common size. You want to stay away from the typical 6 by 9 trim that you will see many of the vanity publishers and things like that out there that use that size. That's a good indication to many that your book is self-published. It's a red flag. So try to stay with the industry standard, which is a 5.5 by 8.5, or Lightning Source, Ingram Spark. All of them have various other trims that you can actually pick as well, such as a 5 by 8, which is used a lot for the 5 by 8 size is used a lot for what they call chick lit and things of that nature. So make sure that you look up and see if there's a particular genre that you're writing in. Look at other books and look and see what the trim size for those books are. And that's what you want to make sure that your book is actually published in that trim size. So that is the size of your book. Okay, so let's go on to number 5. This is one that most people are really interested in, and that is developing a book marketing plan. I wish I could actually go through this in detail and really kind of dive deep into the importance of developing a book marketing plan. Now, this is something that I try to tell students, ones aspiring authors that are looking to self-publish their first book is you want to develop your book marketing plan at least 1 year before the release of your book. And that's something that most aspiring authors don't do. It's great to write that book. That's awesome. I encourage you to do that, but you also want to start marketing your book a year in advance. And you want to have your marketing plan. If you decide that you're going to go with the traditional publishing route, most traditional publishers now are requiring a book marketing plan. So that's something to consider. Whether you're going traditional or self-published, it's important to have a book marketing plan. And again, you want to do that at least 1 year before the release of your book. There's a particular author out, and her book has been selling very, very well. And, her company, they started marketing that book about 8 months prior to the release date. And it shows because once her book released, she had so many pre-sales already for her book. So you definitely want to start marketing your book. And what goes into a book marketing plan? Let's talk about what goes into a book marketing plan. There are quite a few things that go in there. One thing is you want to make sure you have an author website. Now, there are many, tools out there to develop an author website, but when you start putting yourself out there as an author, or that you have a book coming, just kind of, warming up the market, as we say, for the release of your book, people are going to want to check you out. So they need a place to go. Your website is a resume for people. It tells them who you are, what you do, how you do it, where you've done it before, how successful you are, whatever the case may be. Your website is your author resume. So I encourage you to have an author website. My website, for any of you who want to visit my website, it is marianlthomas.com. That's marianlthomas.com. And you'll see a lot of the key things that I have on my website. Your website should include things like your author bio, a professional photo, your book, and book descriptions, any events that you're going to be attending, or if you're when you're just getting your book going, you don't really have a lot of events, but you can talk about things. Events could be like, chapter 1, chapter 2 is ready, things of that nature. Get your readers excited about the progress of your book. You want to have a blog, if you can, link to your blog, and a media room once you start to get reviews and things of that nature for your book. You'll want to make sure that you have a media room on your website. So again, you can go to Marian L. Thomas, and it'll give you a good idea of what to include in your website. But in the beginning, just get an author website going, get that started. Something else that's going to be very important to your marketing plan is getting a newsletter established. And I particularly like to send up quarterly updates to readers. And the way that you can get an email list started or a newsletter, you can use like MailChimp. They have a free version that you can use. So you want to get your newsletter, and that's basically if you have a social media, which is the next bullet point there on your social media platforms, such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, on your social media, release like a chapter of your book and require people to sign up for your newsletter in order to get it. So that's a great way to start building your email list before your book comes out, is to have a copy, have a sample copy of your sample chapter of your book, and use that as what they call a lead magnet. So you want to have lead magnets. Maybe it's the cover. You could use like a sneak peek to your cover of your book. In order for them to get a sneak peek of the cover of your book, they have to sign up for your newsletter. So these are just tips and tricks that you can use in order to grow your email list and be able to send out a newsletter. A newsletter is also a good way to keep your readers informed of what's going on with you. And when you're sending out your newsletter, don't always just talk about your book. Be personable with your readers. Tell them a little about you, what's going on with you, maybe some of the frustrations that you're having with writing your book, because there will be some. If you have writer's block, they love to read those things in your newsletter. So make sure that you include some personality in your newsletter when you're sending it out. Now, social media is very important when you're an author. You're noticing that more and more authors that are even New York Times bestselling authors, they're getting more involved in social media. Who knew we would go into a pandemic? And believe it or not, social media has been a way that many authors have survived during this pandemic, is because of social media, because they're able to put themselves out there and connect with readers while people were quarantined and at home and had nothing to do. Book sales actually was on the rise during the quarantine because of the fact that people were home, and people are still home now. So you want to make sure that you have a good social media presence. You definitely want to make sure that you're using Facebook. I know that may seem like old school on Facebook, but a lot of book clubs are on Facebook. So you want to connect with book clubs. So you'll need to make sure that you're on Facebook. Instagram is becoming a very popular tool now for connecting with readers. So you want to make sure you're set up on Instagram. Of course, Twitter is out there. I don't necessarily use Twitter as much as I use Facebook and Instagram. But Twitter is also another social media tool that you can have in your arsenal as part of your book marketing plan. And just remember that if you are going to go the traditional route, when you're submitting your book marketing plan, the publisher will want to know what your author platform is. An author platform means they want to know how many people are following you on each of your social media platforms. So they want to know how many people you have in your newsletter. They want to know how many people you have following you on Instagram, Facebook, all of that. So it's key that you start building. That's why I recommend that you start marketing your book a year before it releases, because it's key that you start building your platform way before your book comes out. And this way you have a good amount of people who will purchase your book once it comes out. Now let's talk about book reviewers. Book reviewers, getting people to review your book. Most people on Amazon, they changed. They used to call reviews, now they're called ratings. So book ratings is what Amazon actually calls it now. But you want to aim for at least 50 people to review your book. So I can recommend that you go out and look for bloggers who blog in the genre that you're going to be writing in, and you submit your book to them, give them a synopsis of what your book is about, your cover of your book, and ask them if they would be willing to review your book. But you want to reach out to another tip and trick for you that most, of course, self-publishers, authors don't know is when you go on Amazon and you see, look at some of the top books out there. There's always, Vine Voice reviewers, top reviewers. Amazon considers them top book reviewers. A lot of times, if you click on their name, when you go to their profile on Amazon, they list their email address because they're readers. They like getting books. So look for books in your genre. Click on their people that have reviewed their book. Click on those reviewers' profile and look to see if there is an email address for them. And if there is, reach out to them and let them know about your book, and try and get at least 50 reviewers set up. And I say 50 because out of that 50, less than half will actually write the review. So you'll end up with around 15 to 20 reviews for your book, which is when you go to start marketing your book, marketing sites. If you even like BookBub and things of that nature, most of them are looking for you to have somewhere between 10 to 20 reviews before they will market your book. That's why I try to encourage you to make sure that you have your book set up to have at least 15 to 20 reviews when the book hits. So it is also important for sales. When people see reviews of your book, at least 15 to 20, they feel like, okay, this is a book that I can purchase, especially when they're not familiar with your work. So it's important that you try to have reviews set up for your book. And these are, look for book reviewers, because these are people that know how to write reviews for books, and they can help generate interest in your book. So make sure that you aim for at least 50 reviewers so that you can land somewhere between 15 and 20. Now, it's also important to know who your targeted audience is. This is really key. Most times, when you ask an aspiring author who your targeted audience is, and they say, well, my book is really for everyone. Everyone can, and that's great, but not everyone is going to buy your book. Not everyone is going to like your book. Not everyone reads your genre. So understand who your targeted audience is. If your targeted audience is women, then it's not, you still need to know, like, what age bracket. Are you targeting women between 25 and 55? Is your book young adult, or is it new adult? Is it for children? So know who your targeted audience is and find out where your targeted audience hangs out. There are a lot of groups on Facebook um, that are really specific about the genres that they read. So look on Facebook, make sure that you are really going after those type of readers, and you understand where your target audience is, who they are, and where they're hanging out at. So I know there's some couple of questions in the chat. So as I get through this, I'll go through the chat, but let me go through this and then I'll come back to and look at some of the questions in the chat. So let's also talk about your book blurb. This is the back copy content. This is the most important thing. This is what will sell your book. So you want to make sure that when you're writing your book blurb, there are companies out there that actually can do this for you. They can write what they call selling content for your back copy. So look into that, or if you have someone, another author that you're close with that has sold books, reach out to them and maybe have them look at the content that you're wanting to put on the back of your book that kind of gives the reader a synopsis about your book. The most important thing about your book, besides the cover, is the back. So the front cover and the back cover are what sells a book. You want to make sure your book cover looks great. You want to make sure your book blurb, your synopsis on the back of your book is going to sell your book. When you're in bookstores, when you're doing book signings, any of those things, the first thing people do is turn the book over and they read the back of the book to see what the book is about. So you want to make sure that that book blurb is on point. Cannot stress that enough. So we've talked about book clubs and the importance of being on Facebook and looking for book clubs on Facebook. Something else to talk about is making sure you have a digital media kit. When you're going through a digital media kit, this is something that is going to go on your website. When you start dealing with the press, they're going to want a media kit. So let's talk a little bit about what goes into a media kit. So there's two different types of media kits. There is a digital media kit. That's the one that you will link to, you will have on your website. It is a PDF that people can download. So it's a downloadable PDF that you will have on your website. Another one is just like what we call a book sell sheet. And that book sell sheet is just about your book. So it's something that is quick for like bookstores, things of that nature, to kind of know what your book is about. So your digital media kit is going to include things like your author bio, your author photo, any speaking topics, at least one press release, at least one book review, and any media features that you've been in, any newspapers, magazines, radio, any of those things, you want to make sure that you have in your media kit. When you're talking about your one-page sell sheet, you want to make sure that you have this on your website as well. This is a PDF that people can download. On this one-page sell sheet, you want to make sure that you list 4 key things. So I'll give you a minute to write these things down, but it's 4 key things that you want to have on your sell sheet. One is you want to tell them your book details. So you want to tell them the trim size for your book, the genre for your book, your retail copy, your retail price for each format. You want to have your book formats. So does your book come in print? Does it come in paperback, copy? Is it available in digital format, Kindle, Nook? You want to make sure you list your formats. You list your release date, the date the book is to release, and your publisher information. So those are things that go on your one page sell sheet. And again, it's one page that's in a PDF that can be downloaded from your website. And of course, you want to make sure that you have that for any that might go to your, like if you're dealing with a bookstore, bookstores, they want just a one sheet. It's a great way to get your book into bookstores. If you have bookstores in your area, you will take your one page sell sheet to them, and it gives them all the information. It tells them how to where they can get your book. Remember, we talked about distributors. Most bookstores deal with they order your book through a distributor, but most of them have an account with Ingram, which are wholesalers. So most bookstores will order your book through Ingram, and the way you get through Ingram again is through your distributor. So Ingram Sparks is a division of Ingram. So it's one of their child companies. So when you set your book up with Ingram Sparks as a distributor, you're also setting your book up with Ingram as a wholesaler. So Ingram can then send your book, get your order for your book when it's ordered from bookstores. So it's important that you have a distributor that also has Ingram, because most bookstores order their books either through Ingram or Baker and Taylor, but most of them are through Ingram. So I'm going to take a moment real quick and just look at the chat real quick and see if there's any questions. Do you see your viewers a copy of the book before it's officially released? Yes, yes, you do. So you do send you do want to send a copy of your book to reviewers before your book is actually released. So usually most of them will take a digital copy of your book, which is like a PDF version. I recommend if you start sending your book out to reviewers, once you have your book, and we're going to talk about the formatting of your book. But once you formatted your book for like digital, which is like Kindle or Nook, most reviewers have a Kindle app, which is free. And so, or a PDF, so you can actually send your book to them in that format. So if you don't want to send them a physical copy because you may not have physical copies, but one thing to know is that Ingram Sparks does allow you can purchase copies of your book before it's actually released, and you use those copies, advanced reader, they're called ARCs. So advanced reader copies you can order through Ingram Sparks, and you can send those advanced reader copies out to book reviewers. Using an advanced reader copy or an ARC doesn't have like the fancy cover and all of that on it. It just gives the reader the reviewer a good clean copy interior of your book, and but the cover doesn't have to be what it actually looked like. It could be more of a mock-up. But you can do ARCs with some of the distributors and get copies of ARCs and send those to your reviewers, or you can reach out to reviewers and send them a PDF copy of your book. So that way you can get that set up. I'll go back through at the end of this for a lot of you who may have missed um, my word counts that I put up for nonfiction and for some of the other. I don't have the word count for poetry because that just varies so much. But I'll go back through and show that. Your book blurb, you want to have your book blurb somewhere between 250 to 300 words, and then just kind of tailor that down, but, strive sort, for about 250 to 300, and then whittle that down somewhere between, 100 to 200 words. And as far as nonfiction, a workbook type, I would say probably stay with the traditional, which is probably like Garmin Pro. Should you have separate social media pages for each book? I see this sometimes. You don't want to make it difficult for your readers. I recommend that you just have one social media page that people can find, because, if you have a social media page for this book and a social media page for that book, if someone's following this particular book that you have, they may not know that you have other books. So I recommend that you just have one social media page for yourself, and it tells people about all of your books. How do you protect your book before sending it out to distribution? That's what I recommend. There's also smash words. I think it's called smash words. I think it's what it's called, but smash words is a great way to go in and publish your book through them and be able to send reviewers digital copies of your book without having to worry about your work not being protected and them not being able to give your book out. But most book reviewers, that's not really an issue. Most of the book reviewers that you're going to find on Amazon, that's not going to be an issue. So I didn't talk about a publishing application software. If you mean like how to get your book published, we talked about using Amazon directly, using Nook Press if you want to get your book onto Nook. We also talked about going through Ingram Spark. That is a publishing distributor that you can use to get your book out there. So should you create your cover before after your book is written? Oh, wow, that's a great question. That's a great question. Yes, I would recommend that you start working with a book cover designer once you're pretty sure, pretty confident about, once you've gotten your book pretty much written and you're getting ready to start sending your book off to the interior designer and things of that nature. You want to make sure, yeah, go ahead and get your cover going. At least get the digital cover done. Because that way you can start marketing your book. Remember, we talked about you want to market your book a year in advance. So you want to make sure that you have your cover. So at least have them do the digital cover. They don't have to, you won't get the print cover ready until your interior is ready to be formatted. And we'll talk about that. But yes, try and get your cover done as soon as possible. So that while you're still going through all the other phases of the book production process, you want to make sure you get your book going and you try to, so you can get it out. And as far as keeping your branding across whatever platforms you use, that is very important, Bonnie. So I have a professional book cover designer, Canva for self-publishing. Well, let me just tell you that yes, Canva does offer some options for designing your own cover, but I would recommend, so just remember that so is everyone else using Canva to develop their covers. So I would make sure that you want a book cover that's going to be unique. So, try to get, there are a lot of companies out there. There are even some out there that would do it for 250 if you're just looking to do a digital cover. but I would encourage you to try to get a book cover designer to design your book. You want to make sure that when your book comes out, you don't want it to look self-published. You don't want to have seen your cover on a lot of other, your images on a lot of other covers. So I would recommend that you look for a book cover designer, okay? All right, so I'm gonna move away from the chat for now, and we're gonna continue on because we've only got a few more minutes. So I'm going to move a little quicker through these next steps. I apologize to that, but these next steps are pretty simple. So step number 6 is called an LCCN. And the LCCN is your Library of Control Congress number. This is the book, and you'll see an example here. This goes on the copyright page of your book. This is important if you want to get your book into libraries. You need an LCCN. Most of these companies out there, like vanity publishers and things of that nature, they charge you for this. This is free. Don't pay for an LCCN. This is free. You can this allows you to also, you have to send a copy of your book to the Library of Congress. But to get your LCCN, you're going to apply for what's called a PCN. They are the same thing. So don't get confused when you go out there, but you're applying for a PCN, which is a pre-assigned control number. Once they assign you, your PCN is actually going to be your LCCN. And this is this number here that goes on your copyright page. So make sure that you do not pay for this. You can go to Google. I provide the website here for you. So here is the website. If you can jot that down, that will take you to where you need to go to apply for your PCN. Make sure you get that website. Do not pay $100 to someone to get this for you. So make sure you get that, okay? I'm gonna move on. Number 7, let's talk about price. You don't wanna price your book out of the book game. You wanna remember that when you're pricing your book, you need to consider your cost. So you wanna consider things like your print costs, your distribution costs, and what your net profit expectations. I think I mentioned before that most paperback books net a profit between $2 and $4 that's for your print, your paperback, and your hardcovers. Usually you're going to make somewhere between $1 to $2 in profit, depending on how you price your book. Typically, if you have a 300-word book for women's fiction, I can't speak for other genres, but typically for women's fiction, if it's a $300-page book, then your book is probably going to be priced somewhere around $15 to $16.99 for that book. And your print costs are going to be somewhere between $4 and $5. And then just remember that Amazon is going to take 40% of that so that's where you get your net from. So when you're doing your net, you're looking at subtracting that 40% that the distributor like Amazon is going to take, your print costs. And so that will help you to figure out what your net profit is. And I'll come back to the chat. I've got to move on, guys. I see you in the chat, but I want to make sure we get through these, but I'll try and get through these pretty quickly so I can answer a couple more questions for you, okay? All right, so those key things about pricing your book, just to make sure that you don't price out. Look at other genres and how they're pricing their book. And just remember that a lot of the pricing that you're going to see is by traditional publishers. Your book is going to be a little bit different because you're not going to be able to price your book at that low that the traditional publishers can, because they're printing books, 10, 20,000 copies of books. And you're doing what's called digital printing. So digital printing is not as cheap as offset printing. So you're going to pay a little bit higher for your print costs. So your book is going to be a little bit more than a traditional publisher. Okay. But keep in mind about pricing. The other thing that this is extremely important, is once you finish writing your book, before you send it out to anyone, you want to copyright your work. So it's a $35 fee. Don't pay a company to do this for you. Go to the copyright link that I have provided for you on this page and copyright your work. It will cost you $35 to do so. You will upload your manuscript to the Copyright Protection Office, and then they will send you a certificate that shows you that your work is copyrighted. So before you start sending it off to reviewers or anything like that, someone else asked me about protecting it. This is the way you do it. So make sure that before you do anything, you send it off to anyone, even if you're looking to get traditionally published, go ahead and copyright your work. So go to the copyright link that I have here, pay the $35 fee. It's a simple process. It's about 6 or 8 steps. They're going to ask you to upload your manuscript to them. It doesn't have to be edited or anything like that. And make sure you get your work copyrighted. It's a $35 fee. A lot of companies out there are charging $100 and $150 to do this, to copyright your work for you. But it's really only $35 and you can do that yourself. And you want to make sure that the copyright is in your name. So copyright your own work. Okay. All right. So let's move on to number 9, which is the ISBN. I told you we would come to this. ISBN is not a foreign word. It is really a resume for your book. It is when you go to a bookstore and you get ready to purchase a book, you see this barcode on your on the book on the back of the book. This is your ISBN number right here. It's usually a 13-digit number. And they also supply you a 10-digit code, but Amazon and most bookstores all use this 13-digit number, and it gives them all the details. It tells them what your trim size is, what your retail price is. All of that is included in this information. When they scan that book, it gives them everything, your ISBN, your retail price, everything. So you can go to like myidentifiers.com and get an ISBN. They're usually about $100, $150 for an ISBN. You can also buy them in bulk. I would warn you that there are a lot of companies out there that sell ISBNs, but they're selling them under vanity. So you will see cheap ISBNs for like $10, $20. Do not purchase those, because they're listing themselves. What they have done is they have gone out there and they have purchased ISBNs in bulk, and they're selling them for $10 to $15. But then your book will be published under their company name. So purchase your own ISBN. I know it's $100, $150. I think it's $125 for an ISBN, but purchase your own ISBN for your book. You will need an ISBN for your print books, not for digital. So you will need an ISBN for your paperback and hardcovers. And you need one ISBN for each one. You cannot use the same ISBN. So you will need one ISBN for your paperback and one ISBN for your hardcover, okay? So it's important to make sure, again, that company is called myidentifiers.com, myidentifiers.com. So make sure you go out there and you purchase your own ISBNs for your books, okay? Get them in bulk because it's cheaper that way. Okay, especially if you're looking to self-publish more than one book, and you're going to publish books in multiple copies, multiple formats, print and paperback and hardcover. You want to make sure that you get at least a bulk of 10. Okay, all right, I'm going to go on to the last one, and then I'm going to try and jump into chat real quick. So let's talk about formatting your book. Just like we talked about getting a book cover designer for your book, you also want to format your book using a professional interior designer. I cannot stress that enough. To use an interior book designer to format your digital version and your print and your hardcover. I've listed one of the companies on here that I have used. They do a great job. They will format your book for print, hardcover, and for digital, and make sure that when people read your book on Kindle or Nook, that they would give you a MOBI file for Kindle. So you'll need a MOBI file for Kindle and an EPUB for Nook. So if you're using Nook Press will require an EPUB. For using Smashwords, you can use an EPUB. The only one who uses Mobi files is Amazon. So in order for you to publish your book on Kindle, your book must be in a Mobi format, and an interior book designer can format your book for that. So you want to make sure that when whoever's going to format your book is formatting it for all of the formats that you're going to use. So if you're using print, paperback, hardcover, or digital, you want to make sure that they're doing it for all of them so you have a consistent look included. You want to, they may ask you if, you want drop caps, if you want annotations, which are like little images inside the book. If you're doing a workbook, it could be a little bit more expensive to get your interior book designer because there's quotes and all of those things and pictures and all of that. And just know that most times when you're doing that, your pictures are going to come out in black and white unless you pay to have your book printed in color. So those are my top 10 things for self-publishing your book the right way. I'm going to jump in the chat real quick and try to answer some questions. Okay, I know Kindle provides a free ISBN for any good, yeah. So the ASIN is something, Kindle will assign to your book. That is not an ISBN. Those are two separate things. So that is for your Kindle version. The ISBN is for your print. You will need that for print, for your paperback and hardcover, not for digital, not for Kindle. You can do an ISBN for digital, but it's not necessarily required. Okay, I'm going to go back and show those word counts again. ISBN has rules about where you can sell your book. Again, I'm recommending that you use Amazon only for the Kindle version of your book. You will use Ingham Spark or another distributor for the print editions of your book. I only recommend that you use Amazon, again, for the Kindle version of your book, not for the print copy, because it is limited on where your book can be sold. So again, try to only use ISBN to publish the Kindle version of your book, okay? The process to get it Amazon is difficult. Yeah, yeah. That's why I'm telling you to get your own ISBN and not use an Amazon ISBN to get your own, purchase it. I'm glad everyone is enjoying this workshop. I'm glad it's been helpful for you. I'm going to go back and show the screenshots of the word counts. So give me a second, guys, while I get back to that, okay? I'm glad everyone enjoyed this.
Marian, we have less
and if
than
you're
a minute.
looking for someone, if you need a consultant to help you self-publish your book, I am available. My rate is $60 an hour. I do have packages available. If you check my website, I should have those up by next week. But I do offer, so here's nonfiction. I'll give you a moment to jot down the nonfiction titles, the word counts for nonfiction, but I do offer consulting. Please reach out to me through my website, or you can email me at mlt@marianlthomas.com.